We live in pretty confusing days. Arguably, humanity always has, but it feels pretty confusing in a lot of ways right now in our society. We just now, in reading from 2 Peter, he mentioned, no prophecy of Scripture ever being up to someone's own interpretation. And it seems like 20th and 21st century American Christianity really got stuck up in the question of, well, isn't that just your interpretation? And in fact, that's really kind of not just Christianity in the West, that's kind of the world right now. Oh, that's just your interpretation. Everybody is equally clear about different things, right? It's a time of heated disagreement, and so it's hard to tell what's real. I mean, we live in a really weird time where it's tempting to say that there's more confusing stuff out there that you think is real that might not be. I mean, we live in the age of artificial intelligence where we see pictures online and even on the TV screen that we're told are real, and only to find out that they are deep fakes, that they've been edited by AI, or that's not really a person. We live in an age where you can get a call from somebody who says that your son or your daughter, and they have their voice and they sound like the loved one, and actually it's just AI deep fakes. I mean, we live in a world where fake stuff looks and sounds more real than I would venture to say it really ever has, and can look more appealing and beautiful. So there's a lot of fake stuff out there. We've been living in the world of, so-called fake news for a long time, and we all disagree about what the fake news is. And so we live in this very confusing world of what's real, what's not, and what some people consider real, the other half of the country considers fake, And so how do we live and navigate this world where there are not just differing opinions and interpretations, but seemingly different realities where we don't agree about what is real and what's fake? But much more importantly than that, even when you establish what's real, what is most important among the real things? There are so many real things that we can talk about and argue about and negotiate as a society and within our church. But it's a wholly different question about what is important among all the real things and what is most important. And I feel that among our scriptures today, from 2 Peter to our reading from Matthew, it seems to me that is one of the primary things being presented to us is the question of what is most important. It became very clear on the day of when Peter, James, and John were with Jesus on the mountain. It became abundantly clear to them what was most important, right? Suddenly, it was revealed to them the true nature and identity of Jesus. And while they might have thought of him as a great master or even the Messiah who had been promised by the scriptures, when they saw his true nature, his glory shining, life changed. They suddenly understood in a way that they never had. And so we need to ask ourselves, what does it look like to live a life that is informed by that simple, very simple and clear knowledge that Jesus is the most important thing? It's a very simple sermon. In many ways, the point of today's sermon is first things come first. The most important thing should be the most important thing in our lives every day. And Jesus is the most important. Now, in 2 Peter, we're kind of going to work backwards in a little bit. I'm hoping you remember the story that we've read, and Debbie recounted well to the children about the transfiguration. Peter is talking about his experience on the mountain. And he says this interesting thing. It's in the context of arguing against false teachers who have come into the church. He says, "We did not follow cleverly devised myths." Think about that. We did not follow cleverly devised myths. But he then talks about what they saw. They saw his majesty. We were eyewitnesses, he says. Now that's real, okay? This is not a fake myth that we came up. We didn't concoct this story about Jesus being the Messiah or being raised from the dead or about his identity. We were there on the day when his majesty was revealed, and we saw his glory. And that's an important thing to recover. Still in our modern day, a lot of people think Christianity is just a nice story that some people came up with. There are still people out there who argue that the 12 disciples kind of made it up. But Peter and the apostles insisted, we didn't make this up. In fact, all these other false teachers, the people teaching heresies, they're the ones making stuff up. We're the ones telling the truth. Which is already bringing us to one of the first things that we need to realize is that among a world of many different realities, where many different things seem true, where we can all witness the same thing and walk away with different interpretations, it doesn't just matter that something is real, that we can say we've seen it. It matters that it's true. And truth is something that is revealed, not just something that you perceive. So here in this story, Peter, James, and John are brought up not by their own effort, not by their own agency. They didn't decide to have this revelation. Jesus brought them up the mountain, and then God revealed to them who he was. And among all the different realities, all the things that they believed to be real, suddenly they realized the truth of who Jesus was. As the Son of God in his divine glory, he is the King of Kings. Now, this is important because we are people who have to discern constantly the difference between fake and real. Part of our job as Christians, we are people who are invested in the truth, and so we need to go about our days caring about what is real and what is fake. But also beyond that, we have to care what is true, what is false. Now, on the day when Jesus revealed himself to those three disciples, imagine being there, okay? You have to see the scene in your mind. It would be quite a thing. It says that his face shone like the sun. That's not just a glowing face. We're not just talking about a little extra brightness. I mean, I don't think the comparison to the sun was an understatement. Or an overstatement, sorry. I don't think it was an overstatement. His face shone like the sun. Can you look at the sun comfortably? No. And his clothes became white as light. That must have been something else. And then they see Moses and Elijah. Now, Moses and Elijah, the two greatest prophets in many to the Jewish mind. I mean, Moses, who had brought them the law from Mount Sinai. Elijah, who had raised the dead. He had done amazing wonders, and he had been brought up in a whirlwind into heaven. He didn't even die, okay? These two considered some of the greatest prophets, both of whom had an encounter with God on Sinai, went up a mountain and spoke to him face to face. And so here we see them talking to Jesus, and Peter has this really weird, interesting reaction that I think many others have kind of scratched their heads. We're not exactly sure what he meant. And in fact, I think it's in either Mark or Luke's gospel, the narrator enters in and says he didn't know what he was saying. You know, it was like he didn't even know how to react. But he says, let me build a tabernacle for each of you. And we could interpret that in a couple of different ways. Perhaps to his mind, Jesus is on par with Moses and Elijah. He is a great prophet. And so Peter's offering, we could build a dwelling for each of you. Perhaps this is a sign of like, Peter is hoping or assuming that they are taking up residence, like that this is something of permanency. It's going to stick around. Like, we want to keep this, whatever's happening here, let's keep this going. You know, you imagine any good moment that happened in your life that you didn't want to go away. Like, if you could build a house and make sure it didn't go away, you'd do it. And so Peter is trying to capture this moment in a way. And it seems like he might see Jesus on the same plane as Moses and Elijah. But what happens? A glory cloud comes down, a cloud of God's glory. Now, this is where we should be reminded of Mount Sinai, where we read the story of Moses going up the mountain, and there's a cloud of glory on top, and it says it looks like fire. Now, again, just imagine Moses walks up the mountain, and he walks into it. It calls it a consuming fire. You watch as your leader gets consumed by fire. He goes up the mountain, he goes in there. And in this moment, the three disciples who are watching Moses and Elijah, probably thinking about that story, see this glory cloud, this light cloud come down over them, and they hear God's voice for probably the first time, although this isn't the first time God has said it. He said it at Jesus' baptism as well. He says, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I'm well pleased," right? And then, when the cloud lifts, what do they see? Only Jesus, right? And of course, I left out the main thing, maybe the most important thing God says. "This is my beloved Son, with whom I'm well pleased. Listen to him." So first he sees Moses, Elijah, and Jesus. Then when the cloud goes away, he only sees Jesus, and God says, listen to him. Now to a Jew, it's hard to say exactly what they would have understood, but it sure sounds like God is saying it is more important to listen to Jesus than Moses and Elijah. Or perhaps, more faithfully, it would be, if you want to understand and obey what Moses and Elijah taught, you will listen to Jesus. Right? See, if you remember from last week's reading in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, I did not come to abolish the law, that's Moses, or the prophets. Elijah represented the prophets, but to fulfill them. And so Jesus doesn't erase them, he fulfills them. And if anybody wants to achieve what was promised and offered in Moses and Elijah, then they will listen to Jesus' voice. Now, I'm doing a little bit of rough translation for a bunch of non-Jewish folk, but I think it's fair to say God is saying Jesus is paramount. He is the summit. He is singular. Focus on him. It's a call to simplicity. Imagine, to go up a mountain, we talked about mountains. To go up a mountain is to leave the world behind. The world slowly goes into the distance. You go up, things get quieter, you become separate from society in a way. You become secluded. You come into solitude. Maybe not on every mountain, there's some high traffic mountains, but you know what I mean. And so you're kind of separated. Jesus separates his three disciples from the world. He brings them up to have this amazing encounter. And imagine the silence up there. I mean, you hear God's voice, and then the silence is even more pregnant, more powerful. And I think not only the communication to them that day was very simple and very clear. This is the only thing that matters, the most important thing, and that is still the message to us today. And so, really, I guess where I felt God calling me to call us as a church is to ask ourselves the very basic question of whether the most important thing, Jesus, is the most important thing in our lives. And if our daily lives represent that. Whether in the way that we spend our time and our money and the way we live our relationships, are we clear inwardly and can it be observed outwardly that Jesus is first? That he is the summit and the most important thing. The nature of our society has become one of busyness and distraction and much good. Part of the struggle for us is not only that there are many different realities and real things, there are many important things in the world. There is, school. It's important, kids. It's really important to learn. There is work. You got to earn for your family. It's very important. There is family. Of course, we all know that is one of the most important things. Our institutions are important. Our legal system is important. Justice is important, right? There are so many important things. And guess what? Many of these important things make demands on our life. They pull and tug on us, whether because we care about them and it tugs on us because of our conscience or because justice is important to me. My children are important to me. Education is important to me. But also people ask things of us and make demands of us. And before we know it, we are on a ride and we find ourselves thinking and feeling, how do I get off this thing? Like this is a busy life. It is confusing. And I am not sure how to live as a faithful disciple in this busy life. I think that captures many American lives, incredibly busy, where we are doing our best to fit Jesus into the cracks. We are doing our utmost to say the prayer on the way to work, to do whatever faithful thing we imagine we can, but we are shoving it in tiny cracks all the time. And on the one hand, it's the gargantuan effort it takes to do that is commendable, it's admirable, it's kind of beautiful. I see parents breaking their backs to try and make sure their kids do all the homework and are in all the activities and going to the sporting events and it's in so many ways it's impressive and admirable, and I genuinely admire so many parents, but I see you getting broken by it. I see families getting under immense stress all the time because they're trying to do all the things, and we can't. It's just impossible. And they're all good things. family's good. Good things happen when we send our kids to school. Good things happen at school. Good things happen at sporting events and the discipline and the camaraderie and all of the lessons that come from that. So many good things happen in all these areas. But the frank reality is that we're spread thin. And faith gets a tiny chunk of every day for most of us. And I'm just not convinced, friends, that is what a life looks and feels like, where Jesus is first all the time. I don't think he's meant to be shoved into the cracks, or that we are meant to go around hastily trying to make it all work, exasperated, exhausted. Hear me. I am so impressed with how everybody does it. But I'm quite certain that as Jesus took the disciples out of the world in order that he would equip them to go into the world, as Jesus brought them into seclusion and intimate encounter with him so that they would be empowered with a powerful witness to go into the world. So we need daily solitude with Jesus. Daily we need a powerful encounter with him, not necessarily an emotional encounter, but we need a substantial amount of time and energy invested in our relationship with Jesus every day that will then enable us to do what little we can. And that's the thing, is like, we just can't do that much. We need simpler lives, less overcommitted lives where, look, here's the thing. While all these things are good, there's so many real things, there's so many important things, and there's so many good things in each of those areas, all things are simply not equal. Okay? So, if we are, as a family, out most evenings of the week doing things together, but never talking to each other as a family, we're in the same place, active together, observing each other, but we are not sitting at a table sharing meals regularly. If we are always in church on Sundays, but never praying together with our children, face to face, we are doing good things, but probably not the best things. And we as Christians should not settle for less, but we should seek the summit. We should desire the highest and the greatest. Not, let's go to the event or let's do the thing and bring Jesus with us. Let's make sure that everything is about Jesus, and if we can fit the rest of life in the cracks, okay, let's do that. Psalm 99 that we talked about today, it talks about these prophets who spoke to God and he answered, and how God is a God who brings justice. There is this very frustrating reality. It's very simple. If you get the order wrong, then everything goes wrong. But if you get this simple order right, everything falls in place. So in the psalm, it talks about these men who prayed, they called out to God, they asked, and he answered, and out of that flows justice. Similarly, you have to seek the Lord first and his kingdom and its righteousness, and all these things will be added to you as well. That's Jesus' words in the Sermon on the Mount. We tend to get the order wrong. We tend to functionally, pragmatically, put a lot of other things first and then try to follow it up with Jesus, or just pray the prayer like, Jesus, be with us, or go with us, or do the thing, or bless the thing that we're doing, please, rather than seeking him with our whole heart, putting him in his kingdom first, and then seeing what else can come along. Rather than Jesus accompanying us where we're going, seeking to accompany Jesus where he's going. You see, that simple order changes everything. And the promise held before us is, if you will seek his kingdom first and his righteousness, all these things will be added to you. And so if you are feeling exhausted, exasperated, if you feel like you're on a ride and you don't know how to get off, and this life just feels impossible, or being faithful and having a substantial walk of discipleship every day feels like fitting Jesus in the cracks, I want to tell you there is an alternative. Real alternative. And it's simpler. And it's clearer. And it probably means giving up some things that are important and good for the more important most important, greatest good, whose name is Jesus.